That's a beautiful song. Let's hear it again for our home team. So here we are. We have arrived. It's Christmas Eve. Christmas is almost here, and now that for the most part the preparations are done, we can stop, we can take a breath, and we can reflect on the deeper meaning of Christmas, because we know, as much as we engage in the gift giving, we know it's more than the gifts. It's about the love and the thoughts that went into them, yeah? It's more than the trees and the lights and the decoration, which is a way to kind of visibly call in the light when we see the candles and the lights all around us. It's about being near and dear to the people that we love and having a chance to practice generosity with them. Christmas also has a way of increasing whatever is happening in your life. So if your life is good, if you have your family and friends around you, it's a time of joy and celebration. If you have children with you, it is a magical time. It's truly magical. But Christmas also shines a light on that which is missing and who is missing in our lives, isn't it? So we may have an ideal picture of what Christmas looks like, and we rarely get that perfection. We do sometimes. There's moments, and when you get it, boy, just mark that moment, because it's great. Because if someone you love has either recently or has died and they're not with you, it can make this holiday especially difficult, can't it? Or if you've experienced a divorce or an illness or the loss of a job, and it also kind of puts a spotlight on that. And I think the truth is there's room for it all. There's room for the celebration and for the joy and the magic, and there's also room for the grieving that we may be doing, or the missing of someone who is not with us, because life is cyclical, and we all go through the ups and downs. Sometimes it's great, sometimes not so much. And again, just knowing that wherever we are, it will change, that there's room for everything. So we stop and we look at what is the deeper meaning of Christmas. So in Luke chapter 2, verse 6, while they were there, the time came for her to deliver her child, and she gave birth to her firstborn son and wrapped him in bands of cloth and laid him in a manger, because there was no room for them at the inn. And I think that's our first clue in this story, is that Jesus was not born in the inn. And you remember how crowded and noisy it must have been during that period, because there was a census that was being taken. So everybody had left their home. Everybody's on the road. And you can imagine the number of people and the cacophony of sounds. And truth is that the Christ within us cannot be born in that crazy energy, right? We need to step aside. And as the Holy Family did, Jesus was born in a manger, and so the Christ is born in us in the manger of our hearts. So this is the arrival. This is the day that we have been waiting for. This is the birth of the baby, and we have a baby here. And it's exciting, right? I mean, it's so exciting when a baby is born, and we just love to just look at them, especially when they're, a month or two old. There's just they have these eyes that can still see into other dimensions in a way. And so there's this fascination and this love that we have for babies. I remember when my daughter was tiny, and I used to, you get up in the middle of the night and you feed them, and Caroline seemed to me, she was up all the time, all night. but she would do this thing that I called beaming, and I would be exhausted, and I'd be holding her, and all of a sudden she'd look at me, and it was like her eyes would just open, and I'd get hit with this, like this strong beam of love would just come through her and just knock me in the heart. And I never knew when it was coming. I never knew how long it was going to last, but it literally almost would knock me over. And it only happened like in the middle of the night when I was alone with her. And I think she may have done it once to one other person who handed her to me and said, "You won't believe what just happened." And I go, "She beamed you, didn't she? She beamed you." And of course, as she grew older, it wore off, right? By the time she was... Now she beams me in a different way. She still beams me, though. So we're celebrating, obviously, the birth of the Christ. So what does this mean? What does the birth of the Christ mean? What is this? We talk about enlightenment. We talk about awakening. And what does it mean to us individually and collectively? So in Unity, you know that we see the Trinity a bit differently: the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, the Father, Mother, God, the divine mind, the Son, or the Spirit of Christ that's within each one of us, and the Holy Spirit being the activity of God. So we're celebrating that divinity that's within each one of us. We're celebrating that Christ presence in each one of us. And so it's not about one person waking up. It's not about one God waking up. It's about all of us waking up together. It's not about somebody coming who's going to save us, because the truth is we all have to wake up in order to save all of us and the planet, right? Barbara Marx Hubbard said it this way. She said, "Our story is a birth. It is the birth of humankind as one body. Christ consciousness and Christ abilities are the natural inheritance of every human being on earth." I think Jesus said it this way when he said, "Ye are God's sons and daughters of the Most High." Do we always act like it? Not necessarily, but that's what we're called to do. That's what this is about. It's the New Jerusalem. It's the waking of us all together. I think one of the ways to describe this waking up is through a Buddhist sutra. And the story goes that whenever the Buddha would come to teach, he would accept the invitation of the first person who invited him, no matter who that person was. So he was coming to a village to teach, and usually he would go to the elders and all this stuff, but the first person to invite him was a geisha. So he said yes, because that's what he did. And it made the elders angry, because how dare he go hang out with a geisha, right? It's kind of like Jesus being criticized for hanging out with the tax collectors and the prostitutes. So he goes to this geisha's home, and all the young people come, because they're like, well, this sounds like fun. And they had these jeweled parasols that they carried in ancient India. And so the young people all brought these ancient parasols, and they set them down in front of the Buddha. And then he did this thing with them where he had them sort of like go up in the air, and they began moving, and they began to reflect the cosmos. They began to reflect the sun, the moon, the stars, the planets. And what he said is, when you look at these stars and these planets and these galaxies, it's not like we're looking at a fireball and we're looking at rock over here, but the way they see it is that they're seeing humans, they're seeing all beings of light, they're seeing many different civilizations, and so the point that the Buddha was trying to make is that we're all interconnected. That it isn't just some inanimate objects that are up there, but it's this whole interconnectedness of life that's happening. And Robert Thurman, who translated this sutra, said that when we think about it, the internet is that for us today, right? So what he did with the parasols was seeing all this interconnectedness we see with the internet, where we're discovering all these different things that are happening in the world as soon as they are happening. And what are we experiencing and what are we seeing but suffering, right? We're also seeing joys and celebrations, but we're also seeing suffering as soon as it happens. So one of our issues, and Emily Cady said it in Lessons in Truth, is that we believe that our suffering is because we believe we are in bondage to the flesh. That I'm me, and I'm stuck in here, and you're there, and you're stuck over there. And, maybe we can connect once in a while, but what we're called to develop is compassion and empathy. That's really what the awakening of the whole Christ is about, is the compassion and the empathy. So Robert Thurman said that with all of us knowing everything, we are kind of forced by technology to become Buddhas or Christs or something enlightened. And so compassion comes when we are able to lose ourselves. And that can be through art, it can be through singing, it can be through meditation, it could be through love. There's many ways that we can lose ourselves. But what the Dalai Lama was saying is that we, as we develop compassion and as we wake up, we'll want to expand, to know you, to know what's your joys and your sufferings, because our own little story gets boring, right? And we have this incredible capacity to take in so much information and so much love that why would I want to just be stuck in this story over here when there's stories everywhere, when there's kindness and compassion and suffering and joys? We're not limited to just ourselves. He says, Robert Thurman says, compassion comes when you discover that you lose yourself. And the Dalai Lama says that when you give birth in your mind to the idea of compassion, it's because you realize that you, yourself, and your pains and pleasures are finally too small in the theater of your intelligence, right? And what does it come down to? It comes down to generosity. So what does this look like in life, right? Okay, this is great. The Buddha's got his parasol and seeing all the galaxies and, all the interconnectedness, and we have the interconnectedness with the internet. But I think the way it looks is what happened last week when the Amtrak train jumped the tracks, right? So I was reading a story about a soldier from Lewis McChord Base. His name is Robert McCoy. He happened to be an Army medic. He was a medic. And he's driving on I-5, and all of a sudden he hears this loud noise, and he sees the train, and it falls onto I-5. And he says there's 3 cars in front of him, and he slams on his brakes, and he doesn't hit anything, and he gets out, and he said that there's people screaming and running around, and he immediately grabs his stuff, his, I don't know, his I have it written down. He said it hit 3 vehicles that were in front of him. He grabbed a tourniquet and a CPR mask, and he headed toward the wreck. There were people laying on the pavement, and he was afraid that the train was going to fall on them, so he moved them out of the way. And once he did that, he climbed into the train to see who he could help. And he said there was one woman who was like a grandmother who was like hanging out one of the windows and just hanging there, and her daughter was trying to hold on to her, and he came and helped her and brought her down. He said, I couldn't afford to be scared. I couldn't afford to be shocked. I had to do what I am called to do and focus and channel that and help these people around me get to safety as best as possible. There were 2 other soldiers who were in their cars that day going to work, and they also jumped in and they helped. And one said about that moment, he said there was compassion. There was a clear understanding that people were in need of help. That's what the Christ awakening looks like, right? It's like when we're in a situation, and it's the same thing that the 9/11 responders did, right? When they went into the buildings that were burning, they had no thought of themselves but to serve and to give. So So we don't live in a perfect world, obviously. There is still much suffering and many things to be fixed, but with each step each one of us takes, we awaken to that. In this sutra, it describes what a bodhisattva looks like, and we're all bodhisattvas awakening. A bodhisattva's Buddha field is the magnificence of the conception of the spirit of enlightenment. A bodhisattva's Buddha field is a field of generosity. A bodhisattva's Buddha field is a field of tolerance. It is a field of meditation, and it is a field of wisdom. And these are the steps that we have been walking through in our Christmas story, and we'll walk through it again tonight. But this is an example of the arrival. So what does that look like on a daily basis? It means just what you're already all doing, I'm sure, is doing good, right? Helping, even if it's your dog or your cat or your neighbor or your child. It's that moving forward and being able to step outside of this physical body and perhaps get to the place where we can beam each other like a newborn can beam us, right? To be that source of complete divine love that we each are, and yet it gets covered up. We forget because we get locked in these bodies, we get locked in this skin, and we forget that we are all interconnected. Just as the paracells and the galaxies are, we are interconnected all with one another. So if you don't have plans tonight, I invite you to come back for our candle lighting service. I don't know how many I've done, but a number of them, and I have to tell you, this was the best one yet. Was anybody here last Wednesday? Would you agree with me? I mean, really, it was. I left last Wednesday and I went, this was the best candle lighting service we have ever had. Everything was just wonderful. So if you're not involved with your relatives or other things that you have to do, or maybe bring your relatives here, just come and join in that energy of waking up together. Because when Jesus said, when two or more are gathered in my name, there am I in the midst, it's here. It's in this place. And it's here every time we come together and we sing and we worship and we know the truth together. So may the Christ be born in each one of us this day. Merry Christmas.